As a Northern Ohio coaster enthusiast, I am blessed with having some awesome coasters within an easy driving distance from me. Cedar Point is often touted to be the very best amusement park in the industry, as the rides there are often built to be record breakers. Enthusiasts who call this park home are often blessed with these new additions on a schedule that others can only dream of. With some caveats, we are currently on a yearly schedule when it comes to receiving new coasters. As the flagship park in the Six Flags chain, and North America's highest attended seasonal amusement park, Six Flags Corporate obviously feels that these new additions will continue to boost attendance and revenue at Cedar Point. However, to any of us who attend Cedar Point on the regular, the park has its flaws. Some are glaring, such as the lack of shade in many areas, and other flaws are a bit more subtle, less noticeable to the untrained eye. One such issue is ride capacity, or the amount of people a coaster can cycle in a given period of time, usually measured in people per hour. To many locals and enthusiasts, a day at Cedar Point can't be enjoyed without a fast lane. A busy day at Cedar Point will see its flagship rides hit waits well over an hour long. If you're in the know, you can be strategic about your ride choices, but I commonly hear the mantra that fast lane is needed to really get the most out of your day here. That is true for a lot of Six Flags parks, but nowhere gets as packed as Cedar Point does on a regular basis. Well, maybe nowhere outside of the Disney bubble and SoCal parks like Knott's. For those who are uninitiated or used to attending a park where wait times are generally low, it can be incredibly frustrating to wait over an hour for a single ride on a Cedar Point coaster. This understandably generates a lot of dissatisfaction to the public attending at peak times. Join a Cedar Point Facebook group and you will see continuous posts about guests who wait over an hour for a ride just for that ride to break down and close, thus having burned all of that time for no good reason. These people are often blasted with negative comments and ridiculed, but given the circumstances, I can understand why someone would be frustrated. How does all of this relate to ride capacity? Well, simply put, a ride that cycles through more people will have lines that move at a faster pace. Unfortunately for Cedar Point, their flagship attractions are generally low capacity, while many of their older coasters are high capacity. I have calculated some rough numbers on what the theoretical maximum capacity is for each of Cedar Point's major coasters. Again, these numbers are rough, and just here to give you a general idea of what these rides can accomplish. Firstly, I want to address the elephant in the room. Yes, these numbers are vastly different than what websites like RCDB and Coasterpedia show. The thing is, they are using numbers either from way back when these coasters opened, or they are using manufacturers' stated capacities, which especially in the case of Intamin, are outright lies. For an example, let's take Gemini. RCDB claims Gemini has a capacity of 3,300 riders per hour, vastly more than the 1,500 I have listed. When Gemini opened, each side ran 3 trains, but Gemini hasn't ran 3 trains per side in years. Instead, there is always 1 train on each side out cycling, while the others are loading in the station. Knowing this, we can use the listed ride time of 140 seconds to calculate the optimal number of dispatches per hour, which for Gemini we get 25. With 30 riders per train, that means we get 750 riders maximum per side in a given hour, thus our 1,500 riders per hour. With coasters that feature multiple trains, we have a bit more to look at. Let's use Top Thrill 2 as our example. A train can only dispatch from Top Thrill 2 once the train ahead has cleared the top hat. There seems to be about a 90-second interval there, so we get 40 dispatches an hour with 20 riders per train. So we get 800 as the maximum capacity. 800, by the way, is a dreadful capacity for a headlining coaster at any amusement park, let alone Cedar Point. Coming back to our chart, we can immediately notice a few things that stick out. The most popular rides at Cedar Point all have low capacities. Maverick also fares horribly in this analysis. 12 riders per train, despite that dual load station, combined with a lengthy period between Maverick's block zones, mean that it has a pitiful 864 riders per hour as its maximum capacity. It's no wonder the cattle stocks fill up on it on the regular. Shit, I have seen Maverick's fast lane fill up as well, so you may be waiting quite a long time to ride it. Next up, let's look at Steel Vengeance. At 1,152 theoretical riders an hour, on paper, it seems to fare better than Maverick. However, now is a good time to differentiate between theoretical capacity and how a ride actually operates. Steel Vengeance has cumbersome restraints. Though just a seatbelt and a lap bar, the lap bar is large and heavy, and Cedar Point requires that guests buckle their seatbelt and then a ride-op comes by to staple you after checking your belt. This doesn't sound like much, but it all takes time. Compound that with guests themselves. Some guests may not fit on rides. Some guests may require assistance getting into said rides. And all rides are meant to be as accessible as possible. And all of this needs to be handled in a delicate, albeit prompt manner. For rides that are more difficult to load and unload like Steve, this will take more time and ops will not be able to hit those minimum intervals. Given all of this, Steve operates below 1,000 riders per hour consistently, which is a shame given how popular it is. The older rides tend to have higher capacity. That is, if they still operate with the number of trains they were designed for upon opening. Cedar Creek Mine Ride, Gemini, and Iron Dragon operate at reduced capacity from when they opened. Cedar Point has felt that they either can't or won't operate these with more than 2 trains these days. However, Magnum operates extremely efficiently on busy days. With 3 trains, and little to slow guests and operations down, it can dispatch nearly 1,700 riders an hour. Raptor could probably give it a run for its money if it didn't have the bins off to the side for guests to store loose articles, as people always seem to take their sweet time putting their crap in those. The B&Ms in general, though, have really good capacity. This is why, in one of my last videos, I was so adamant that Cedar Point consider adding a B&M Hyper as their next coaster using the Snake River Falls plot. B&M makes highly reliable coasters that feature trains that seat up to 32 passengers, and as evidenced by the ones in this park and elsewhere, they are truly people eaters. However, Cedar Point chose not to get a high-capacity B&M as their next coaster. Instead, they chose a Vekoma Tilt coaster, and though it looks fun, it's an absolutely dreadful addition capacity-wise. So it's finally time to discuss Siren's Curse. Man, what a disappointment. Don't get me wrong, it looks plenty fun, and I know I will have a blast riding it. However, it's not going to be a coaster that many are going to be able to spend their time re-riding endlessly. At 720 riders per hour, waiting for this ride will be worse than waiting for Maverick. My god, all of this because they wanted the gimmick of the tilted drop. Remove that and put in a launch lift, and I bet this thing could cycle a lot more riders. However, Cedar Point being Cedar Point needed a gimmick, and seeing as Six Flags Mexico was denied their permit to add this, despite having already bought it, it got shipped here with little thought to whether it was a good fit for Cedar Point or not. Again, The ride experience itself looks to be amazing. Seriously, shout out to Vekoma for making such a cool layout. The problem is, it's just that the gimmicky tilt coaster isn't a good fit for Cedar Point. A Vekoma Shockwave with 3 train ops would have been a far better choice, with this ride going to one of the less privileged Six Flags parks. It's just, how many of these low-capacity coasters with huge lines is Cedar Point going to get before they realize how much the average guest hates waiting in these lines? Top Thrill 2 and Siren's Curse combined don't have the capacity that Magnum alone has. It's a big deal in the grand scheme of things, and will be a generator of guest dissatisfaction in the years to come. So what can be done about this? Well, we can modify the existing rides and operations to improve efficiency. Let's consider IROC, or International Ride Operator Certification. A generalized way to describe IROC is a set of rules and procedures ride operators must follow when running amusement rides like coasters and flat rides. Most of my viewers will know what this is, but for the uninitiated, I will give a general rundown. Next time you attend a major amusement park, watch the ride operators at the various coasters. You will see rigid procedures, with each ride operator being assigned specific tasks and only those tasks at a given time. You will see safety verification done in a very specific way, restraints checked and double-checked visually, and specific signals and instructions being given out to guests and other ride ops. And finally, you will get that distinctive all clear signal when everything has been verified. It is very safety oriented, but it takes things a little too far. Let me explain, because a safety focus is always a good thing, but one can argue that some of the procedures go just a bit too far. For example, ride ops will check your restraints, and then afterwards, they will circle back around to visually double check restraints again. That takes time. Before giving an all clear signal, ride ops are required to be in very specific safety locations and do another visual scan of the station area to make sure again that all things are safe. All of this while the clock is running. It seems a bit overblown to me that ride ops need to check restraints essentially twice, even though the second time is only visually, and that extra safety check before the dispatch does seem unnecessary. This isn't to gripe too hard on the issue, but I do feel that these standards could be slightly relaxed in favor of faster operations. IROC is here to stay, and we can gripe about some of the procedures till the cows come home, and I doubt any of that will change. However, there are modifications to the rides themselves that Cedar Point could make that would be in compliance with manufacturer specifications to increase ride capacity. So, to preface this, I asked my viewers if you have rode Top Thrill 2. Well, if you are some of the lucky few, you will have noticed something missing from the trains: seatbelts. See, the old Cedar Fair Corporation had this bad habit of putting seatbelts on everything, despite the fact that the majority of these rides were designed not to need them. Let's take Blue Streak as an example. It has seatbelts that slow down operations, that have to be checked and then visually checked by operators. But across the country, you will find wooden coasters like it, with trains just like it, that do not have seatbelts. These can be removed. If the renovation of Cedar Point's most cursed ride, Dragster, can operate without them, most rides there shouldn't need them either. Remove them off steel engines, and I'm sure operations would improve significantly. You aren't going anywhere with that giant lap bar securing you. Other than modifying trains, I suppose that some braking systems could be modified as well, as park time on some rides is rather high. Blue Streak again comes to mind, but really, at this point I am rambling on. The point is, Cedar Point needs to consider capacity when adding new coasters rather than throwing down on the flashiest gimmick possible or the hot new coaster in the industry. Personally, I would prefer that they go right back to B&M unless they can find a manufacturer that can provide the same capacity they provide. 720 riders per hour on a brand new coaster with 2 train ops is going to be a disaster at this park. This has been your friendly neighborhood coaster serpent, and I am tuning out for the day. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed.